What's the best way to utilize a camera in video games? Well, there isn't a strict answer to that. Different games take different approaches. In terms of perspective, there's first person and third person. Some games like to give the player control and others opt for fixed camera angles. But when it comes to the cutscenes, a lot of games frame them like films do. Over time, we've seen a lot of big budget games take a highly cinematic approach and do their best to imitate real cameras. This intersection of filmic elements and video games has brought up discussions of the legitimacy of video games as art. Are they actually art? Will they ever be on the same level as film? People still ask these questions, but the late 2000s is when these discussions really kicked off. And that's mainly because of film critic Roger Ebert. He was a strong believer that video games can never be art. His main arguments were 1. Games are a lower form of culture and are for children. 2. Games do not add value. 3. Video games are more comparable to sports than art. And 4. Video games lack authorial control. The interactive elements means that the experience is under the control of the player and not the developer, so it can't be art. These arguments crumble very easily, and a lot of people are just bored of answering these questions. But it's what these discussions lead to when we're done saying yes or no. That's where the conversation actually gets interesting, which is why I'd like to talk about game cinematography for a bit. More specifically, Hideo Kojima game cinematography. With Death Stranding 2 coming out, I thought it would be a good time to revisit his work. Before we begin though, let me introduce you to Joseph V. Mascelli, filmmaker and cinematographer of the 1960s. He basically created a manual for the visual language of film called the 5 C's of cinematography that laid out standard practices in the industry. Those 5 C's are camera angles, continuity, cutting, close-ups, and composition. And as most films adhere to these practices, so do a lot of video games. But I would argue that Kojima's work is a big part of what popularized these techniques in video games. Kojima obviously loves movies. If you go on his Twitter or Instagram, he's always inviting actors to his studio, and he continues to collaborate with big names in Hollywood. He grew up watching film, made his own short films as a teenager, and wanted to make films professionally. But the path to the industry wasn't easily accessible, so he went into the game industry instead and joined Konami in 1986. And if we go back to his oldest projects like Snatcher or Police Notes, the influences are immediately clear. While these two games are mainly point-and-click graphic adventure games, the Metal Gear series is where a lot of his film expertise really shines. With Metal Gear Solid, it's literally in the name. Tactical espionage action. The main premise of the majority of these games is infiltrate this place and stop terrorists from using this monstrous nuclear weapon called Metal Gear. It's a gross oversimplification of what actually happens in them, but that's not really important. Kojima has said that his goal with Metal Gear was to make a game that recreates the tension of The Great Escape, the thrill of the chase, trying not to get caught, and I would say that him and his team have succeeded in not only recreating it, but evolving it and having it extend to gameplay as well as cutscenes. I'd say they succeeded pretty damn early on too.
Did you ever see the movie The Great Escape? It came out last year.
I must have missed that one.
The Great Escape is a film that tells the story of Allied soldiers escaping from a prisoner of war camp during World War II. The soldiers come together and make the most of what they can for their escape, while also being heavily watched. And those are the foundations of Metal Gear Solid. When you begin Metal Gear Solid 1, you have nothing but binoculars and cigarettes, so you have to use whatever you can find to proceed. There's several surveillance cameras, searchlights, and soldiers all around you, and sometimes enemies will pick up on your sloppy mistakes, like your footsteps in the snow or walking on loud surfaces like puddles and grates.
What was that noise?
And getting spotted really sucks. Radar gets jammed, everyone starts shooting at you, so you have to do your best to stay hidden. There's usually different ways to get past things. When it comes to enemies, you can choke them out, distract them, or sometimes just walk right past them. But sometimes you'll get a different kind of obstacle. Within the first hour or so, you'll find that there are infrared lasers now blocking your way, and you can either go find some infrared goggles to detect them, or you can smoke your cigarettes to get past them.
Cigarettes? How are those going to help you?
You never know.
The fact that that's even an option is both mad and impressive, but again, emphasizes the idea of making the most of what you have. And it's those little details that make Metal Gear Solid feel close to reality, even though it's obviously the farthest thing from it. That's pretty much the gameplay. Regarding the cutscenes, they're very cinematic. They're all framed and blocked correctly, and every character gets introduced with the actor's name next to it. On the surface, it may not seem like much. We're so spoiled nowadays with graphics and cutscenes, so when you see Metal Gear Solid today, you can instantly tell it's a PS1 game. Laughable by current standards, but back then, having these kind of cutscenes and action sequences were insanely impressive. I'd argue a lot of it still holds up today, but what's even more impressive to me is how Metal Gear Solid is shamelessly itself, not just in terms of its humor or its weirdly detailed explanations, but in how visually consistent it is. Loads of video games back in the day were using FMVs, full motion videos, or basically just cutscenes that looked very different from what the game usually looked like. Some modern games still do it actually, but what you'll notice in the Metal Gear Solid games, even from MGS1, is that aside from some occasional live action footage that's spliced in, pretty much all of the cutscenes are in-engine or use the same models and whatnot. We know what the characters look like from the codec calls, but outside of that, we always see the same 3D models and environments inside and outside of cutscenes, and it maintains continuity. It creates a flow instead of suddenly jumping from this to this. To be clear, there's nothing wrong with having higher budget cutscenes like this. That sudden jump can be useful for different reasons. It can highlight the importance of a cutscene or express certain things that can't be shown normally, like character expressions or the size of certain areas. It might show things that wouldn't look as good with the usual environments or models, and I'm sure that people didn't mind back then. I don't even mind them that much now. They're still really cool cutscenes, but it's still disruptive, especially from a cinematic standpoint. Having consistent visuals means it can be more effective at easing us into gameplay, and therefore allows us to be more readily inserted into these crazy action sequences, like fighting a helicopter, fighting a tank, fighting a damn ninja, or fighting a screeching bipedal nuclear battle tank. We go from witnessing insanity to actually playing through it. It makes it feel like we're playing through an action movie, and I believe that the connection between the cinematic and the interactive there is an incredible achievement for its time. But even though technology at the time limited Kojima and his team, as things progressed, their games have only gotten better. They evolved, technology evolved, and they continued to implement all sorts of things, big and small, to present a unique experience within each game. And in 2013, Kojima said that he was finally able to recreate the Great Escape with Metal Gear Solid 5. Advancements in technology really allowed for Kojima and his team to take the cinematic in their video games to the next level, and as you can clearly see, there's a significant jump between this game and its predecessors. This game makes an effort to feel like a big long take. There are quite a few loading screens, but cutscenes have minimal cuts, and where possible, cutscenes can lead smoothly into gameplay sections, and the cutscenes by themselves are incredibly polished. A big part of that is due to how good this game looks compared to the other games in the series, not only in terms of graphics but also the filmic elements. The shakiness of the camera, rain and dust landing on the lens, the unique lens flares, generous usage of depth of field, it makes it feel like a real handheld camera is following the action. And these effects carry on into the gameplay, being both aesthetically pleasing and sometimes serving as a visual aid. The depth of field helps the player distinguish different parts in the environment, such as when they're aiming or using the binoculars, and the lens flares are very over the top, but they quickly alert the player to any searchlights in the area. But a lot of this wouldn't work without the sound design. It's outstanding. In this scene alone, you can hear the bullet casings hitting the floor, the rustle of fabric against the soldiers' belts and equipment, the squeaking from the creasing of their boots, and the fact that it's so audible here makes it 10 times more uncomfortable as these two are trying to stay hidden. The games have always had great sound design. The sound and visuals have always complemented each other, even in the silliest cutscenes. But Metal Gear Solid 5's dedication to looking realistic and cinematic is what makes the sound design stand out so much in this game, and I think the best example of how it all comes together is during the opening of Ground Zeroes. Hi, just a quick editor's note. This entire scene is a 10-minute long take, but I've had to edit it down, obviously. There are no actual cuts in the scene, just letting you know in case it's confusing. The sound of the boots against the terrain, the rattling of the fence, and the sharp sound of the blinding searchlight as it hits the lens, all accompanied by the oppressive sound and visuals of the heavy rain. There's several different camera movements and shots that help to build contextual information about these characters, such as the slow revelation of Skullface from ground level shots to his reflection in the close-ups. But aside from this scene looking and sounding great, it also serves as a way to prep players for the upcoming level. As I mentioned previously, the lens flare's distinct sound and visual here is a way to alert the player if they're about to be detected, and Kojima said that its presence in the opening scene is a way of introducing players to that mechanic early on. As the music tape Chico plays becomes a non-diegetic soundtrack for the scene, we follow the soldiers from Chico's cell to the heliport, and if you follow that route that the camera takes backwards, you can make your way to the mission objective, which is, again, another intentional detail that also has a gameplay purpose. maintain that long take, the introduction to Snake seamlessly leads into the gameplay section, and the visual elements of the cutscene are carried over too. This commitment to the long take and continuity can be found in a lot of MGS5. It attempts to uninterruptedly carry us through the action, and it demonstrates one of the many creative ways that cinematography can be used in video games to enhance the experience, being additive to both the gameplay and the cinematics. Now, of course, this style doesn't appeal to everyone. As much as I've praised the mechanics and cutscenes here, I'm not exactly a huge fan of everything in Metal Gear Solid. I really like Quiet as a character, but his design... Come on. And not everyone is a fan of long cutscenes, me included. I can be incredibly impatient, which is why my favourite game of the series is the shortest one. Metal Gear Solid 4 is another favourite of mine, but again, famous for having the longest cutscene in a video game ever. And then we have Death Stranding. When Death Stranding came out, loads of people jumped on the walking simulator bandwagon, because admittedly it does feel like a walking simulator. Early game is just a delivery man going from point A to point B, sometimes peacefully and sometimes painfully. The game looks stunning and the cinematography is amazing, there's no doubt about that, but it's very different from Kojima's previous games. It's not as action or stealth heavy, and its style of gameplay brought up criticisms that reminded me of the are games art questions. If you're gonna make a game, make a game. Why are you making a movie? This is obviously a stupid point. Games are an interactive medium, and that's what will always make it different from film, even if they overlap in certain areas. A crucial part of Death Stranding is reconnection. As much as a lot of the game is just holding left and right trigger and moving the stick forward, a big part of it is also interacting with BB and the markers and structures left by other players. And the larger objective is to reconnect America. Also, it isn't always walking, sometimes the game goes like this.
What the fuck?
Directly interacting with the game emphasizes the loneliness you feel while also emphasizing the importance of social interaction in this fractured world. That level of interaction is why live-action adaptations of video games usually aren't as good. The experience of watching The Last of Us can never truly compare to playing through it, because the game has you directly participating in violent acts that you're supposed to feel conflicted about. It's obvious that pressing a button to smash someone's brains out versus watching an actor do it is a very different experience. Video games are able to establish a more immediate connection to the characters and their actions because of the interactive part, and therefore have the ability to affect us a lot more personally. But it's not a competition either. I don't think that games need to be better than film or vice versa. Going back to those 5 C's, Mascelli also mentions another C that doesn't really get talked about much, and that's cheating. The art of rearranging people, objects or actions during filming or editing so that the screen effect is enhanced. And while you could take this literally and tie it to the idea of working with virtual cameras versus real cameras, I like to think of it more in the sense of just breaking the rules or expanding upon things. As Mascelli himself says, the 5 C's aren't concrete, they're just guidelines. Once we learn the rules, respect them, and experiment if it works. And I think that Kojima's games are an example of that. Those Death Stranding 2 trailers really demonstrate the power of free will, because what the fuck? We'll never see what Metal Gear Solid 5 truly could have been because of the drama with Konami, but even with those limitations, Kojima and his team still created a good game. Their creativity still shines through in many ways, and again shows us one of the many ways that elements from different mediums can work together. But it's not just Kojima games. These games showed us early on what was possible, but many others are proof of this also. It's kind of what I was getting at before with the Expedition 33 video. Expedition 33 transforms and builds upon the best of previous games in the RPG genre, and stands out for its approach to turn-based combat and its gorgeous visuals. It's a culmination of what has come before it, and will serve as an inspiration
for the ones who come after.
Games have amazing potential, as has been demonstrated many times, and they also don't have to be constant cinematic masterpieces either. Games looking and feeling realistic is amazing, but we've never needed to see every fucking individual skin cell for a game to get its message across. It's why some modern games have basically turned back the clock. On the surface, Metal Gear Solid would look like this.
That takes care of the cremation.
But then it would casually drop stuff like this.
Don't forget to save your memories of me too.
Can't save memories even on that system of yours. Memories are fragile things. After you reduce them to binary numbers and send them through the air, they're not memories anymore.
I wouldn't be so sure of that. There's nothing my system can't do.
Memories aren't just sounds and pictures. They exist somewhere between the sounds, between the pictures.
I don't get it. Anything can be done digitally.
If that's true, why don't you go ahead and try to say what I'm thinking right now?
I can't save that type of thing. You have to put it into words at least.
That's right. And that's what memories are. Wordless.
I don't know about that.
No matter how far data technology advances, you'll never be able to penetrate the human heart.
You're wrong. It's just a matter of time.
But first you have to try to understand human emotions, Mei Ling.
And how do I do that?
You have to allow yourself to fall in love with someone.
War, misinformation, loyalty, closure, revenge, grief, responsibility, corporate greed, consequences, finding meaning. A lot of games share messages with other games, but present their messages in different ways. The medium is incredibly versatile, and it's what I appreciate the most about it. Seeing games take advantage of the medium, and sometimes other mediums, to create something new, to push boundaries. And from what we've seen so far, I'm very excited to see what other creators will achieve.